Hello, welcome to the budgeting and finance information session. This is a virtual session intended to provide information to sponsor groups, especially constituent groups that are involved in the sponsorship of refugees that have been identified and selected by ORAT through its mission projects. But also it is a useful session for those who um, are sponsoring their relatives who may need some information about how to organize their finances and the budget in accordance to Immigration Canada requirements for the sponsorship of refugees. So welcome. um, in this session, I will speak about the resettlement principles that guide our work. As well, I will explain the Immigration Canada financial requirements, the financial table or cost table that we use as a template to guide in the calculation of financial support to the newcomers. And also I will explain about in-kind deductions that are allowable by Immigration Canada for purposes of the sponsorship of refugees in ensuring that sponsors and constituent groups can minimize the level of financial support required to acquire certain items which could be provided in kind. I will also demonstrate the RAP calculator and budget workbook which ORAT has developed. I will also speak about the responsibilities of the sponsors and constituent groups in terms of monitoring the budget of their sponsored newcomers, and an example also of the check requisition form that we use for processing of the checks that are issued to the newcomers. And just a reminder about the ongoing responsibility to monitor the settlement activities of our newcomers to ensure that they're in compliance with Immigration Canada's requirements. Thank you. Now, just to give a background to the work that we do, there are certain principles and guidelines that we have developed over the years that we have found to be very helpful in settling newcomer families. And this is especially important in ensuring that sponsor groups, constituent groups that are involved in the settlement of um, refugees, especially um, the strangers, refugees who are strangers who have been selected and identified by the Office for Refugees and have no relatives or families, um, can be able to bond and also find trust in those who are helping in their settlement. So the first principle that is key is building trust. Obviously, we encourage that there needs to be a concerted effort towards building open relationships between the sponsoring group and their newcomer that they are settling. One way to do so is by providing clear guidelines and expectations in terms of what the newcomers can expect from their sponsor group, as well in return what the um, um, sponsor group can expect from their newcomer. So that relationship is very, very important to be able to build so that kind of trust as they continue to work towards the establishment of the newcomer in the community of settlement. Oftentimes it is easier for refugees who are being settled by their family members, but um, for those who have no family members who are being settled, especially those that identified through the Project Hope program of ORAT and who depend on donated funds from parishioners. It's always important to build those relationships to ensure that the newcomers understand the importance and the efforts that go towards their settlement, as well in return also for their sponsoring groups to be able to bond with the families and the newcomers that they are settling in the community. Um, our Project Hope supported um, refugees who depend on donated funds. It's always important to highlight the fact that these sponsorship funds um, are not provided by the government, but rather they are coming from parishioners who give of their treasures to assist in the resettlement of suffering refugees. And so it's always important for members of the constituent groups from the parishes to highlight this, that their work is voluntary. They are not paid by government, but they are giving of their time and talent to assist the newcomers that are welcomed in our church communities so that they can have a new beginning, one with a lot of love and support from the community as they transition to life in Canada. Also, as a way to build this trust, constituent groups need to ensure that they can retain confidence and privacy of any information shared between the newcomer and them for purposes of supporting them in whether it is their health needs or other kinds of access to government services that they need to provide for the newcomer. Most times refugees have gone through a lot of trauma and experiences which they may not necessarily wish to share immediately. And so it's important to treat such information in confidence, but also with a lot of care. And so all of this goes a long way to ensuring that that trust can be built between the newcomer and the sponsoring group that has welcomed them in the community. Um, Another very, very important principle that we emphasize is the idea of sustainable solutions, which offers clear guidelines in terms of what the financial supports provided are intended to cover for the newcomers. In this case, principally the basic living expenses of the newcomers provided for using the funds that are provided to assist the newcomer for their day-to-day living expenses. Also, this ensures that also newcomers understand their monthly budget and also the plan for their settlement, which is designed to be in a manner that is sustainable, ensuring that the newcomers can afford to live and sustain the level of lifestyle that they would have started upon arrival beyond the 1 year period of sponsorship after arrival in Canada. And so this principle is very, very important because we do not want to set up the newcomer to start out life in Canada in a manner that they cannot sustain beyond the 12 months of settlement. And so that by the time month 13 comes around, we would like to see the newcomer continue to be able to live independently and to be able to support themselves. And so this is important to emphasize at the beginning to ensure that the rules set out by um, Immigration Canada in terms of the level of financial support, as well as those that are provided by the Office for Refugees, ORAT, maintained. and also to ensure that there are clear expectations on the part of the newcomer, as well as also from the sponsoring group um, to sustain this level of support. Also, an opportunity to explain how the funding mechanism would be maintained is important to be able to demonstrate that. Oftentimes, one of the things that we find is that um, our sponsor groups or parish communities are very, very generous. And so we are grateful for that. However, would want to ensure that they are not overly generous to the newcomers to the level that, or to the extent that beyond the month 13 of their sponsorship, they are no longer able to maintain or sustain that level um, of support. And so to provide for a minimum level of support, one which is sustainable for the newcomer, would encourage that the sponsoring groups work very closely with the newcomer, as well as within the guidelines provided by ORAT, to ensure that the sustainability beyond the funding for the first year of their sponsorship, so the newcomers do not face financial challenges after the end of their sponsorship, and also can be able to afford um, to remain in the um, accommodations that they may have um, secured during the first year upon arrival, and also can be able to finance some of or all of their expenses during their period. And so this is very, very important. We do have additional principles that we have developed to guide our sponsor groups, especially those that rely on Project Hope funding, which are contained in our constituent group handbook, or what we call as the CG handbook, which is available on our website, on the website of ORAT, which is www.orat.ca, and can be found under the resources tab. So we would encourage any Project Hope funded constituent group or parish groups that are receiving financial support from Project Hope funds to use the CG handbook or guide them in ensuring that these principles are maintained. Now, let's speak about some of the financial requirements involved in sponsorship. First, Immigration Canada follows the Resettlement Assistance Program, or what you call as RAP, as the guide in providing the minimum financial support levels that are required to be provided to resettled refugees as they establish themselves in their new community. The Resettlement Assistance Program, or the RAP, income support levels align with the basic monthly income support amounts which are provided by the provincial social assistance rates, or what you'd call as the welfare rates. So in that way, it becomes like the foundational amount by which support to the newcomers is gauged. The Resettlement Assistance Program, or the RAP rates, are comprised of two components. We have what we call as the startup allowances, which is basically intended to provide for the initial basic needs of the newcomers, um, including things like household items, furniture, clothing, um, setup of utilities, etc., etc. So all of those are covered as one component of the startup allowance for the RAP support. And then additional also, there's the monthly income support component, which is to provide for their day-to-day monthly needs, whether it is food um, that they need, or some other expenses that they have, whether it's to have a transportation fund and so on and so forth. So all of that is included in the monthly income support component. So these two components comprise what we call as the RAP um, support rate. Okay, so the RAP rate is basically what is used uh, to gauge the level of financial support that is provided to the newcomers for the duration of the sponsorship period, which is 1 year or 12 months, depending on whether or not the newcomer is working or not working, whichever comes first. Um, that is what is used to gauge the level of support. Now, sometimes the RAP rates can change depending on whether social assistance rates have also changed. So sponsoring groups are expected to provide support in accordance with the RAP rates, which can, from time to time, change depending on provincial social assistance programs, which are usually tied to the cost of living. And so in that regard, at the time of the refugees' arrival, the RAP rate in place is what is used to determine the level of financial support to the newcomers at that time. If the refugees become financially self-sufficient within their sponsorship period or within the 12 months of their sponsorship, and they're earning a certain amount of employment income, which is basically over and above what they would be receiving in their monthly support, then there needs to be conversations about how to ensure that the financial support being provided by the sponsors can be either reduced or completely ended, because the newcomer is now able to fully support themselves beyond what they'll be receiving from their sponsors. But I'll speak to that in the subsequent slides that are ahead. Okay. And so the other aspects of financial support that I talked about in the previous slide include in-kind items. So sponsor groups, especially our church communities who are settling refugees identified through mission trips from Project Hope, encouraged to use in-kind donations or in-kind goods or items to help minimize the costs associated with purchasing items that are required for the settlement of the refugees, especially if they can secure accommodation, if it is donated, that would be fantastic. Um, Maybe furniture items, clothing, household items, which can be used. Um, a lot of this will help to minimize and to decrease the financial liability required to support the newcomer. Okay, I will speak to to this a little bit later in the presentation in terms of how much can be deducted for in-kind support that is provided to the newcomers, so that the sponsor groups can take advantage of this. Newcomers are also strongly encouraged to assume greater responsibility for their own well-being, whether it is taking advantage of the opportunities that are available through work, employment, uh, or upgrading their skills and so on, with the goal to become financially independent and also autonomous in their well-being. So this is something that we strongly encourage, because a successful sponsorship is one where at the end of the sponsorship period, we would like to see our newcomers being able to stand on their own 2 feet and to be able to provide for their needs and the needs of their families. Now, when determining the level of financial support, there are certain factors that we have to um, keep in mind, in consideration, and these can impact the level of support that is provided to the newcomers. One of such aspects is the age of majority of the family members or the dependents within the family, what we call as adult dependents. So usually in the definition of a family, we indicate that a family includes the parents and their dependent children who are under the age of uh, 22. However, when it comes to financial support, the way in which Immigration Canada determines the level of financial support does not correspond to that definition. Rather, it is based on the age of the dependents. So children who of the age of majority, or who are 18 years of age at the time of arrival to Canada, are expected to be supported at the same level as a single adult individual. And so this has implications in terms of the level of financial support that is provided to a family with such um, composition. So in this case, if a child at the time of arrival is anywhere between the age of 18 or turns 18 years, then that child would have reached the age of majority um, and would be required to be provided support, financial support, um, equivalent to the amount of a single individual. In this case, the current RAP rates stipulate the amount that would be required for that. And so in this particular regard, therefore, if this adult child decides to live with their parents, then there may be certain arrangements which Immigration Canada provides to allow sponsors to be able to apply certain reductions to share the costs of living with this adult dependent. However, if the adult dependent decides to move out on their own and would like to live on their own, then there are also certain considerations that have to be made with regard to the financial support in this case. For example, if the adult dependent who is of the age of majority is living with the parents, um, um, the startup costs that are provided to the family can be reduced, because in this case, the adult dependent does not need a separate, furniture items or other household items that would be required to start up set up a new place. And so those costs can be reduced. Also, things like furniture, um, dining room items and so on, or utility costs and so on, as applicable, or can also be reduced. The same way, the shelter amount, since they are living together with the parents, those also costs can be reduced, since they are provided for fully in kind without any cost to this adult dependent. However, in the opposite situation, if this adult dependent chooses to move out and does not want to live with their parents, then in those situations, we would need to provide this adult dependent fully with the startup costs that are required. Um, However, there is a caveat to that, in the sense that if an adult dependent child decides to move out from their parents and they want to live on their own, and then the sponsor group um, needs to contact ORAT to see how we could find a situation, because their implications is that there would be two family units that would need to be supported. This means the main family unit of the parents and um, the dependent children, as well as the adult dependent who chooses to move out. And that's the child who is 18 years or older who chooses to move out. And so the sponsoring group can choose to either support the two um, households separately, or they would need to contact ORAT to see if we can initiate um, a process to request Immigration Canada to declare a no-fault breakdown process, so that the adult dependent then can be supported um, through government programs that is basically being referred to provincial social assistance program, or um, the sponsor group decides instead to support the larger family unit. So it's a very complex arrangement, but it's important that in such a scenario, if we encounter a family that has adult dependents who decide that they would like to move out on their own, for financial implications, it's important that the sponsor group contact ORAD to see how we can proceed with um, the support arrangements for such a family. Most times, fortunately, we have found that families would prefer to live together with their adult children or their adult dependent children. And so this situation does not necessarily need to occur, because then in that regard, resources are pulled together and support can be provided wholesome for the entire family. However, in the rare event that such a situation happens where the adult child has decided that they would like to move out on their own, it's important that the sponsoring group um, contact ORAT to assist them to see how to navigate this situation. The other situation that could influence also the level of financial support that a family has in their possession is situations where a family has children, where they can apply for the Canada Child Benefits. Um, we strongly encourage sponsor groups or parish groups to assist the newcomers who have children to immediately apply for the Canada Child Benefits. The Canada Child Benefits is a tax-free monthly payment program that is made to eligible families by the federal government to help and the provincial government to help them with the cost of raising their children who are under 18 years of age. Um, the Canada Child Benefits may also include child disability benefits and any other related provincial territorial um, um, program supports based on the net income of the family and the age of the children. Um, the Canada Child Benefits Program applies especially for children who are under the age of 6, as well as also children who are under the age of 18. The amounts vary according to age in that regard. Since the Canada Child Benefits Program and other provincial or territorial benefits programs or rebates are tax-free monthly payments, um, they are available to all qualifying permanent residents. So in this case, our sponsored newcomers would qualify for this, and it is not counted as income or earned income, and therefore it cannot be used to reduce the level of financial support that a sponsoring group would provide to the newcomer. But because it is income that is available to the newcomers, therefore the newcomers can are strongly encouraged to use these funds that they receive towards the cost of raising their children or providing for the needs of their family. Okay, so this is something that is very, very important. It's not money intended to be saved in a bank account or anything like that, but rather for the newcomers to use to assist them in the costs of raising their family, their children, providing for their children's needs, whether it's buying clothing, food, books, um, et cetera, that they need, as well as also um, to mitigate any other costs that are not covered or provided for in the monthly resettlement assistance program RAP support that they receive from their sponsoring group. Okay. Although there are no specific guidelines on how the newcomers can use their Canada Child benefits, but as I indicated, the purpose and the intent of these Canada Child benefits is to assist the families to use these monies with minimizing the cost of raising children and providing for the needs of the children in the family. Okay. All right. Now, the other bit regarding financial support is the issue of income, wherein newcomers have secured gainful employment. The net income that is earned by the newcomer can also go a long way towards determining the level of financial support that the sponsoring group can provide to the newcomer on a monthly basis. Let me elaborate a little bit on this. So when a newcomer decides to work, they're allowed to earn a certain amount of income. And then any amount beyond 50% of their monthly basic RAP rate or the resettlement assistance rate can be deducted from their monthly support by their sponsoring group. Usually the deductions begin after the net employment income of the newcomer becomes higher than 50% of their full RAP monthly support entitlement, at which point income could be reduced dollar for each additional dollar that they have earned beyond the threshold. For example, if a newcomer, let's say a single adult newcomer, receives for their sponsorship support on a monthly basis, a total income of $1,164 a month. And half of that amount, or the 50% RAP threshold for that, is $582. Then if a newcomer is working and is earning on a monthly basis, let's say $500 a month, then that 500 is less than the 50% threshold of their total RAP that they would have received. So there would be no deduction made. However, if the newcomer is working and is earning, let's say, $600 a month, then 600 is more than the 50% threshold, which is the $582 a month that they would receive from their total RAP support of $1,164. So the sponsor group can reduce the total amount that they can provide them from the $1,164. They would be able to allow the newcomer to keep their 600 and then top it up with an additional amount, which would then allow that amount to reach to the total level which would be required to be provided to them, which is the $1,164. So the difference is what the sponsoring group would top up. And then the other balance is retained by the sponsor group and can be provided at a later date if the newcomer loses their employment and are no longer working, or if their hours have been reduced, then that amount could be provided to them. And so there are different scenarios that can be utilized in this situation in order to ensure that the level of support provided to the newcomer on a monthly basis is consistent. It doesn't fluctuate. It's not lower, nor is it higher. It's consistent so that the newcomer is able to sustain. It goes back to the principle of sustainable support that I talked about earlier at the beginning. Okay. Now, there are exceptions when income cannot be deducted. In this case, if the newcomer is attending secondary school on a full-time basis, and then no income is to be deducted from the newcomers who are attending secondary school on a full-time basis, even if they are working and earning income. However, if the refugee is attending secondary school on a part-time basis, then income that they're earning, if they're working, is subject to the deductions stipulated in these arrangements for the RAP calculations. We strongly encourage the newcomers to work with their sponsor groups, especially if they have started working and earning income, to be able to disclose and share voluntarily their monthly earnings so that they can be assisted in preparing the monthly budget calculations with their sponsor groups. If the newcomers decide not to voluntarily share their earnings information with their sponsor groups, or if they withhold any financial information to avoid reporting their earnings, then we ask that sponsor groups or the parish groups have conversations with them to explain to them the implications, or which could result in us being involved in ensuring that um, such information could jeopardize um, further financial support to them, but also we would have to inform Immigration Canada so that they can step in to intervene in those situations, because matters of financial support require to be shared to ensure that the level of support that is being provided is commensurate to the Immigration Canada financial support requirements that are to be provided to the newcomers. Okay, so that's very, very important. we we hope and expect that this effort to share earnings information by the newcomer is voluntarily done and also done in good faith, and not to be coerced. Okay, for Project Hope cases, we definitely encourage that sponsor groups who are receiving funding through Project Hope for refugees that identified through the mission trips, that where in the newcomer is working and earning income, that the application of the RAP guidelines be applied to all such cases, so that any amount that can be saved through those deductions can be applied to ensure that we can be able to assist other refugees as well who currently we are not able to assist because of the limited level of financial support that's available. Also, in keeping with ORAD's sustainable solution, this is why we need to ensure that this can be done for such cases, which will enable us to support as many refugees as we are able to with the limited donations that we receive from Project Hope. However, I'm aware of the reality also of the cost of living and the limited nature of the resource pool. There are certain ways in which sponsoring groups that are receiving Project Hope funding can manage some of the expense gaps as a result of the limited purse that may be available. And so we recognize the challenges that the application of the RAP rates may present for constituent groups that are settling newcomers, especially within the Greater Toronto area. But there are certain things that constituent groups, parishes can consider to minimize some of these exorbitant expenses that they may incur. So one thing is to strongly use in-kind donations, solicit a lot of in-kind donations initially, especially for startups. This way it will ensure that the newcomers will not require a lot of items to be acquired through the limited cash that is provided to the newcomers. Sponsoring groups can make use of the in-kind donation sheet templates, which ORAT has developed and are available on its website, to assist them in soliciting and organizing donations or donated items which they can collect to support their efforts in minimizing those expenses. Additional also, if the newcomers have brought with them any assets, financial assets to Canada on arrival, then we strongly encourage that they use these items to address any of the gaps in expenses that they are incurred, Any of these assets which are found to be over and above the Immigration Canada guidelines can be used to lower some of the sponsorship costs. Um, the constituent groups, we encourage them to work very closely with the newcomers to complete the asset declaration form upon arrival to Canada. The asset declaration form is available on ORAT's website, and it can be used to assist them to know what resources they have brought with them, and then to be able to determine which of these resources um, the newcomers can direct towards their settlement costs and needs. Also, for newcomers who have children, as I indicated earlier, that the use of the Canada Child Benefits and any other government entitlement programs which are intended to help the newcomer families to raise children and provide for their needs can also be directed as such by these families towards bridging any gaps that may exist between the financial support that is being provided by the sponsoring group, um, as well as any expenses that are not met um, from the RAP rates. So we encourage the newcomers to do that. As well, also employment is important, where in there's a possibility that there may be gaps. Newcomers who are able and willing to work should be encouraged to find employment as soon as they're able, so that they can access those opportunities and begin to gain some income through employment, as well as also adding to their Canadian experiences as well through acquiring such skills through employment. Um, at times, of course, newcomers might need to upgrade maybe their language skills and so on. Um, they can be encouraged to attend and participate in those courses or programs as well, or services provided by the government, while at the same time working, doing some survival jobs here and there as well during their spare time. So all of these things can be done concurrently in order to ensure that any of the unmet gaps can be met in that regard. Um, where it is possible for some parishes, we would also encourage them, if it is possible, that they can undertake additional fundraising to, um, to address any gaps that may have come about as a result of shortfall in Project Hope funds that have been provided to them. And that way, it will help to lessen also the demand on the amount of Project Hope funds that they might be receiving for the sponsorship of the stranger families that they are settling on behalf of the diocese. I spoke earlier about the personal assets, which can be used to minimize the level of financial support. This is assets which are brought by the newcomers in the event that such refugee families have brought with them personal assets. Then this table can be used to guide in determining how much personal assets the newcomers can retain for themselves, and then anything excess, which is over and above the stipulated amounts here, can be directed towards their settlement needs. For example, if it's a single refugee, they are allowed to retain up to 5,000 Canadian dollars in their personal assets that they brought, and anything over and above that can be directed towards meeting their settlement needs. If it's a couple, say husband and wife, or two people, then they're allowed to retain up to 7,500 of any assets they brought, and anything over and above that can be directed towards meeting their day-to-day needs or costs. If it's a single parent with a dependent, they're also allowed to retain the same amount, 7,500. And then anything over and above that can be directed towards their settlement needs. If it's a family of more than two, each additional dependent, you would add $2,500 to the 7,500 for each additional dependent, and then anything over and above that can be directed towards the needs of the newcomers. Okay, wherein you have challenges in determining this, you can always contact the Office for Refugees to assist you in making those determinations. We strongly encourage that when newcomers arrive, they endeavor to complete this asset declaration form so that we know what assets they have brought with them and assist them in um, managing those assets towards their needs. Now, the basic minimum rates that are provided for by the government of Canada across the board are what are indicated here. As I mentioned earlier, that the government works with a certain figures or estimated figures to determine the level of support that can be provided to take care of the needs and expenses of the refugees for 1 year. These rates obviously may appear insignificant given the cost of living, especially housing costs and so on. But these are the rates that are provided for, or what we call as the Resettlement Assistance Program rates, determined by Immigration Canada to provide for the needs of the newcomers. Now, in this case, this table includes a compounded 5% amount that was added by ORAT towards the amount that would be stipulated by Immigration Canada. But obviously, many of these costs would only apply at the time of the arrival of the newcomer, not at the time when the application is still in process. We therefore need to ensure that sufficient funds are available in trust to meet the needs of the newcomer upon arrival to Canada. The table does not necessarily reflect actual costs today, but these are estimates of future costs that would be needed at the time of arrival of the refugee. There may be additional costs that are unseen or unforeseen, and based on the varying cost of living rates across Canada. So sponsors are expected to be prepared to provide additional costs at the time of the refugee arrival. For example, there could be maybe medical costs which may come up which are not covered by provincial health benefit plans. That is important for sponsors, especially those who are sponsoring relatives, to be aware that something like that could happen, and they need to be prepared if necessary to acquire supplemental health insurance plans for such situations if there are critical illnesses involved that are not covered by provincial health insurance programs like OHIP or IFH. Okay, so this is just one such table to give you an example of some of the breakdown of the costs. I spoke to you earlier about the in-kind deductions that are allowable to sponsors to minimize their level of financial support. So some of these deductions that are allowable include shelter. So if you're providing housing or accommodation, including utilities and so on a monthly basis, you are allowed to reduce the amount that you would need to provide to the newcomer by 100%. So 100% can be deducted. And then clothing, furniture also can be provided in kind up to a maximum of 70%. The other 30% is to be provided as um, cash support, so that the newcomers can be able to buy other things which may not be provided in kind with a balance. Household needs, window coverings, kitchen utilities, pots, pans, cutlery, dishware, dinerware rather, cleaning supplies, etc. Can be provided in kind up to 50%. So half can be provided in kind, and then the other half needs to be provided in cash, the newcomers to be able to acquire some of the things that are not provided in kind. Linens, there are things like beddings, towels, etc. also can be provided in kind up to 100%. Food staples, including unopened, pantry items, rice, flour, sugar, spices, etc. also can be provided in kind up to 50%, and then the other 50%, the newcomers can purchase those with funds that are provided, the balance of the funds that are provided. So it's very important to take advantage of this to ensure that this minimizes the costs of the sponsorship for the newcomers, especially the startup costs. We have developed a RAP calculator and budget workbook tool, which is very helpful in preparing a budget for the sponsoring group to assist their newcomer so that they can manage their finances. This budget workbook is available on our website, www.orat.ca, which is very, very helpful in assisting the sponsor group in ensuring that they can keep track of the funds that are being provided to the newcomers. And also it allows the sponsor groups and sponsors to be able to record the actual amounts that they have spent on the newcomers, as well as also to provide a forecast, a full year forecast of what the expected expenditures could be for the newcomers. I will demonstrate or show you how you can access this workbook so that you can then be able to use it to guide you in determining some of the expenses that your sponsoring group would need. So if you would go to our website, let me just stop sharing this page and show you on our website how you can access this workbook. What you'd do is on our web. So on our website, we have this page where we have the tutorials. Under tutorials, you'll see there's a RAP calculator and budget workbook where we explain exactly how you can use the budget workbook to assist you to do the calculation. So go there and the tutorials will be able to explain to you exactly how you can populate the workbook. And wherein you have challenges, you can always contact the Office for Refugees through our email addresses, which I'll provide at the end of the presentation to assist you to answer any questions that you might have. Okay. So just to proceed further, sorry about that. So the other aspect is that constituent groups are also required to ensure that when they are developing the budget, they work hand in hand with the newcomer in developing the budget, as well as also to review that budget on a monthly basis to ensure that the budget aligns with the needs of the newcomers as stipulated in the budget plan. Okay, this is very important as part of also the opportunity to build trust and also those relationships, especially when it comes to financial matters related to the needs of the newcomer. As I indicate here, that where practical at the end of each month, please, the finance person for the sponsoring group should review with the newcomer the actual expenses that have been spent versus the budget targets that have been established, and then to adjust accordingly depending on the revenue that's available, as well as also other supports that have come in place during the sponsorship period. For purposes of the sponsorship, usually for Project Hope sponsor groups or Project Hope supported constituent groups, we have a check requisition form which is used by ORAT for for processing the disbursement of settlement funds. The check requisition form is available on our website, and for cases which are sponsored by their relatives, or what we call as co-sponsored refugee cases, these check request forms are processed automatically. So the process is initiated by ORAT upon receipt of a notification of travel. And then these checks are processed on a quarterly basis, or the installments are issued on a quarterly basis and made out to the principal applicant. This is for cases that are sponsored by their relatives, or what we call as co-sponsored cases. The first installment checks includes the startup costs, which I mentioned earlier, plus 3 months worth of resettlement assistance program or RAP support. Okay, that's the monthly income that you would be provided. And then the second check, the third check, and the fourth check installments will only be equal to the 3 months of RAP support without the startup cost, because the startup costs are a one-time support provided to help the newcomer establish at the beginning. And then the subsequent checks, number 2, 3, and 4 installments will only be the equivalent of 3 months of RAP support. So this is as it relates to newcomers that are sponsored by their relatives. However, for Project Hope cases or newcomers that are identified by ORAT and are matched with sponsoring groups within the Archdiocese, ORAT will automatically disburse the first installment check to the constituent group. The check is issued to the parish, and then the parish would issue the installment or the monthly support checks to the newcomers after they've arrived. But the fast check, while it includes startup costs and also 3 months worth of wrap support, would encourage that the sponsor group utilize the opportunity to use the in-kind deductions and so on to ensure that that first installment check is utilized in a way that minimizes any costs which are provided in kind. Now, the subsequent checks that would follow for Project Hope cases would require that the parish group or the constituent group submit a check requisition, which you can download from our website, and then provide also an actuals budget based on the workbook budget, which indicates how much was actually utilized from the previous installment check, so that we can be able to keep track of any monies that are remaining from the support that is being provided due to in-kind support that may have been utilized to minimize the level of support. We ask that the installment check requests from the parish groups that are utilizing Project Hope funds to be submitted no later than at least 4 weeks in advance of the next installment check that they would be expecting for their family. Okay, and all those installment checks requests that follow the first check should include any in-kind support or net employment income that the newcomers are known to be earning if they have gained employment during that time, to include that in the budget calculation for that. If the sponsoring group has difficulty in factoring that in, they can contact our office, and our staff from outreach would be happy to work to assist the group in that regard. This is what the check requisition form looks like, and you can download it from our website. So for the constituent groups or the parish groups that are using Project Hope funds, they can download the check requisition form, Project Hope, and complete it and send it along with a copy of their budget workbook, which indicates the actual amounts or expenses that have been incurred during that period. Finally, as I indicated, it's important that newcomers that we settle are being adequately supported, and in order to ensure that, our office will be regularly monitoring the activities of our sponsoring groups to ensure that they are meeting the settlement requirements of Immigration Canada for the newcomers. As well, also Immigration Canada does monitor all sponsored refugees. Sometimes randomly, they may select a family and ask them to complete a survey, interview, whether it's by email or over the phone with the help of a translator. And if any of the newcomers participate in those surveys, then the responses to those surveys, once assessed against the level of support that they would be expected to be provided, if there's a discrepancy or there are gaps, it could trigger further audits by Immigration Canada of the sponsoring group and of ORAT. So therefore, it's important that you are aware, and also you ensure your newcomers are aware that such a monitoring process is ongoing and could occur to any of them. However, the newcomers have the liberty to participate or not to participate in these audits conducted by Immigration Canada, and there are no consequences in either participating or not participating in these monitoring audits undertaken by Immigration Canada. However, wherein there are issues that have been identified, all the parties involved in sponsorship, this includes the sponsoring group, the parish, ORAT, and also the newcomer, would be required to provide proof that in fact we are fulfilling and meeting the supports that would be required to be provided to the newcomers. We strongly encourage sponsoring groups to avoid providing cash disbursements to the newcomers. Any financial support that is to be provided to the newcomer should be using traceable methods, something like issuing a check or conducting an e-transfer, electronic transfer, banking transfer, so that there is a trace of the support that is being provided to the newcomers. If and when a parishioner would like to provide maybe financial support to the newcomer, would ask that instead of providing cash, if they can deposit that cash in a bank account and then it is transferred as either a check or as an e-transfer, that would make more sense so that we are able to account in the event that proof is required of us to demonstrate and to show that financial support has been provided to the newcomer. Okay. And on the part of ORAT, after the second month of arrival in Canada, the newcomers can expect to receive a newcomer survey, which would be sent by our office to ask the newcomer to complete such a survey so that we can understand what services and government programs the newcomers have already been able to access and what is still pending, so that we can then be able to guide and assist the sponsoring groups to refer them to where they can additionally be able to help the newcomers to access those services which they have not yet acquired during that time. So we ask you to encourage your newcomers when they receive ORAT's newcomer survey to assist us in completing that survey and send it in a timely manner so that we can be able to act immediately on the results of the survey. I want to end this presentation at that. Obviously, there are other sessions which are available that we provide, including the IRCC processing time, the pre-arrival session, as well as the welcome orientation session, which you can also listen to and participate to better assist you as you prepare to receive your newcomer. Again, thank you so much for your attention to this session. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask related to this presentation, you can contact the ORAT office at ORAT outreach at archtoronto.org, or go to our website at www.orat.ca, where our contacts are listed and you can be able to reach out with your questions. Thank you for your attention.